Hi, I'm Park Howell, and welcome to this special 6-year anniversary edition of The Business of Story, episode number 314. That's 314 plus hours of bringing you story artists from around the world to help you excel through the sales and marketing stories you tell. And you know what? I couldn't have done it without you. On July 6, 2015, my wife Michele and I were on the tube, jet-lagged, traveling from Heathrow Airport through the West District of London to our rented apartment in Notting Hill. It was a warm, sunny day, and as we glided through the Tudor neighborhoods, swaying with the rails, I pulled out my iPhone and checked my iTunes account. There it was, live. My first episode of The Business of Story had hit the airwaves. I had to chuckle at the irony that we were halfway around the world when it launched. But maybe it was prophetic in a way, because today I'm honored to celebrate this occasion by introducing you to a very special Londoner who recently entered our life. Our family, actually. His name is Hugh James Reynolds Shaddick. A brother my wife and her 3 sisters never knew they had until the 23andMe DNA test revealed their familial connection. Jim, his wonderful wife Susan, and son Liam, who got this whole party started earlier this year when he found the connection, visited us over Memorial Day weekend to meet the family he never knew he had. It was a magical weekend that Jim will comment on later in the show. But beyond the remarkable story of how this family came together, which we may share on a later episode, Jim Shaddick has lived a storied life. He studied fine art and industrial design at Grimsby Technical College School of Art and was accepted to the Royal College of Art in London but passed for work in Rome. He later became the executive vice president and general manager of Link Smith, a division of Bally Manufacturing. At its peak, Jim oversaw 3,500 employees manufacturing and distributing 3,700 video machines, 670 pinball tables, and between 100 and 150 slot machines per day. That's amazing. He became an international casino consultant, designing gaming experiences from Greece to France to Italy to Russia. And man, I got to tell you, this guy's got some stories. The more I learned about Jim and his family, the more I wanted to capture his story for you and the extended Reynolds family who couldn't be with us on Memorial Day, which, by the way, was the perfect holiday for this family gathering, given that their dad, Major James Reynolds, was a decorated World War II fighter pilot. What's more, the only brother Michele and her sisters knew of growing up, James Stephen Reynolds Jr., was killed in action in Vietnam in 1969 when he was just 19 years old. This destined encounter just goes to show you that life is not just stranger, but stronger than fiction. So please welcome to this very special 6th anniversary edition of The Business of Story, a guy who I am honored to say is my brand new brother-in-law, Hugh Jim Reynolds Shaddick. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Park. I'm really pleased to be here. I'm impressed that you invited me.
Well, I'm impressed that you took the time to be here. Came down to the Strip. Here we are in Las Vegas. It's reopening after COVID, and it's actually my second trip back here. Michele and I were out here for Mother's Day because our son Caden lives out here, and I didn't think I was going to be back quite so quickly. Had a chance to meet you and your lovely wife Susan and your son Liam a couple weeks ago in one of the most amazing family connections / reunions I've ever been a part of. And after meeting you and learning more about your story, I thought to myself, just got to get him on the show. You have led a remarkable life as an international casino consultant and a lot of other things along the way. You and I on our deck down at Munns Park got a chance to talk about story and how it has impacted your career and how you bring storytelling and environments to the casino world, the gaming world, the Pac-Man world. So welcome.
Thank you.
Now, Where do we begin? You have had a long, storied career yourself, and I want to get to the point about the international casino consulting, but can you take us to your upbringing and your world in studying design and fabrication and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I'm a British citizen by birth. At the age of 14, my family immigrated to New York. My father was in the banking business, had worked at the Federal Reserve Bank for Arthur Burns in Washington, worked for the Bank of England in foreign currency. He was one of the original foreign currency traders. Foreign currency at the time was considered as a service for business. He showed that the banks could actually make a profit from trading foreign currency and opened up the Continental Illinois Bank and Trust Company in New York for the purpose of trading foreign currency. So at the age of 14, we moved to New York. 3 years later, we moved to Chicago. He moved up to the head office. I was moved also to Chicago, went to Deerfield High School. And really, for probably some of the family reasons that may come out later, I had a very difficult childhood with the family. So I left. I returned to the UK. I went back to college, or I started college in England, and I went to art school, and I had a minor in mechanical engineering. In England, it's called a HNC, a High National Certificate. At the end of college, Susan, my wife, quit school and supported me through graduation. And at the end of my graduation, I moved to Italy, to Rome.
So with your interest in art, was that something you had as a young man?
Yeah, I had been accepted to art school, Reigate School of Art in England before leaving, and was in my second year there when we immigrated to the United States.
What kind of art did you do?
It was fine art.
Oh, fine art.
Yeah, and in the United States, it became commercial art. And then later, when I went back to the UK, it became industrial design.
Mm-hmm. So then, from there, you went to Milan.
I went to Rome. And I was employed by an industrial design studio in Rome, and about a year after I got there, we lived there. And in the end, we lived there for 5 years. About a year after I got to Rome, the group that I worked for purchased a company in Milan, transferred it to Rome to a new plant. There was all kinds of incentives to reindustrialize the south part of Italy, called Casa di Mezzogiorno. And the Milanese, who operated management, wouldn't move with the company. They abandoned it. So they were looking around to try and keep the company operating. They were looking around for English speakers, and they said to me, "Would you mind if we loaned you to Andreotti, and you played a part in their commercial office?" And I said, "Yeah, of course, I'd be willing to do that." So they gave me a stack of airline tickets, a leather bag full of blueprints, and I started traveling off around the world, selling rotogravure, packaging equipment, printing equipment, rotativa, rotocalco.
So really in the printing equipment business, and you were selling 2 printers.
2 printers, exactly.
Yeah.
We sold to people who did very high volume printing. The company had failed in Milan, had sold the largest printing press in the world. They sold it to Pravda, and had gone bankrupt trying to make it work. So you
went from a fine artist to
industrial design, selling large mechanical machines.
Yeah,
and it was fun. It was very, very interesting. Probably the most interesting sale that I was involved in was to the Bureau of Engraving and Printing in Washington, where we sold high-speed printing presses for the production of food stamps. And if you want an idea of how many food stamps we make, those machines would produce 24,000 sheets, 40 inches by 40 inches an hour. And they had 8 lines like that. And the size of a food stamp, you can imagine how many that is printed on a single sheet.
And in your position there, was there a lot of innovation going on? Because I imagine this was the time when printing was going from the old format way of printing into the new, not quite the digital age yet.
It was on the cusp. There was a company in England called Crossfield that had started to produce a digital scanner where they could take a continuous tone photograph and then digitize it, break it down into cells, and then use that file to mechanically engrave cylinders.
And what year roughly is this?
That would have been in 1967, 68.
So mid to late 1960s.
Late 60s, yeah.
In the late 60s, you're in the printing business. And then where did that take you?
The trips around the world, I was offered a job. Our representative for the Bureau of Engraving and Printing project was North American Rockwell. They offered me a job in the north of Italy. They were also involved with a company that made knitting equipment, high-speed knitting equipment. That sort of distracted me from where I was working. I started looking around for other opportunities, and there was a company in Milan called Argon Service that had produced during the war vacuum tubes and neon signage, and after the war, after the Second World War, had moved into industrial screen printing, and they were looking for also a manager, a sales manager for the English-speaking world. And they offered me a very, very good job. And I ended up moving with them, and with them, my clients became IBM. I produced all of the equipment that IBM originally made, the original PCs on, the printed circuit board manufacturing equipment in Endicott, New York. In Florida, they had a large plant which was purpose-built for the production of the original PC. I worked with Tektronix up in the Northwest at one of their plants, the new Plant 42, I think it was called, on all the imaging equipment for them. And I worked with Bell Telephone, Bell Labs. So the other end of the spectrum in screen printing, I worked with one of the largest poster printers in the United States. A small company in Southern California produced all of the promotional material for the window displays for, I think it was for one of the drugstores, Rexall, I think it was. So it was really varied and applicable really across. I mean, the breadth of the businesses was immense. And one of my prime customers became Bally Manufacturing in Chicago.
So Bally's, this is a company that we would know as a pinball manufacturing machines and jukeboxes and ultimately one-armed bandits at some point.
You know, at that time, Chicago was the center of the coin-op industry. And because it was coin-operated, most of the machines were supported by some sort of precision mechanism that it had to accept or reject coins, had to verify that a coin was the value that you thought it was. And the industry was based on very, very high level of expertise in mechanical systems. And Chicago was perfect because the German engineers, there are German tool makers, there are Czechoslovakians, there are Polish machinists. So you could really build in Chicago what you couldn't build anywhere else in the United States because all of the supporting skills were apparent, were available in Chicago. So I was first involved with Bally. Bally was the umbrella company or the umbrella name. It really consisted of a whole group of independent companies that Bally had purchased or become a part of that built the constituent parts that made a slot machine or a pinball machine or a video game. And my entree into Bally was to help them rationalize their glass printing process for pinball machines, which was extremely expensive, very, very wasteful. There were 18, 19, 20 colors on a pinball back glass, on a pinball playfield. And I came up with a system that automated that process and produced half-tone printing, 4-color process. So actually eliminated probably between 10 and 15 steps out of the printing process. They were very happy with that.
So your expertise was really about printing on difficult surfaces, screen printing on, be it glass, be it cabinetry or whatever, and trying to find more cost-effective, more efficient ways to do it that still held the vibrancy your customer was looking for.
Yeah, I mean, one of the people that you wouldn't think of as being an electronics manufacturer is Coors Beer. Coors Beer, because of their filtration skills, were experts in the production of ceramics. Ceramics became the basis for chips called hybrid circuitry. So Coors had an electronics division in Colorado that I provided equipment to produce hybrid circuitry.
It's pretty interesting how it's all interconnected that way.
Yeah, it really is.
Then you were working out there for a while, and you were watching how they were making Pac-Man.
Yes.
And you came up with a whole new idea about the cabinetry.
Yeah, by now I'd moved from Argon Service in Milan. I was now working with a Swedish company called Svacia, who was the largest supplier of automated industrial printing equipment in the screen printing business. And at a meeting, actually a luncheon meeting, I overheard a conversation where a salesman was making a pitch to sell electron beam coated wooden sheets that he proposed could be used as cabinetry. That's the size of the cabinets for video games. And just listening to the conversation, overhearing it, really eavesdropping, I realized that we could do it with screen printing directly for much, much less than he was proposing. So I sketched out a plan for Bally, and they adopted it. By then, they knew me quite well. They trusted me, and I ended up selling them $3.5 million worth, which in those days was a lot of money.
So just overhearing, eavesdropping in this conversation, you could picture what this gentleman was selling and even how they might go about doing that. Yeah. And it gave you your idea of like, well, wait, we could do that, but even better. And you went into Bally's. And so at this point with Bally's, you're just a vendor.
I was a vendor.
Trusted you.
Yeah, really, sales is you're a vendor, and you're also a consultant. Because, a lot of salesmen, we'll get into this maybe a little bit, but when I moved across the desk to become a buyer, as opposed to selling somebody something, you realize that a lot of people just come in and say, we do this, we do this, we do this, we do this, and they never really listen to what you need. So what the person is looking for is advice. Is not just a product. It's how to use a product, how to properly adapt a product, how to apply a product. So that was my value, and because of the success we'd had in printing the glass with the pinball back glass, they trusted me on a much bigger deal. Like I said, $3.5 million or $3.5 million in those days.
Well, how did they make the first Pac-Man cabinetry that then you came in and really revolutionized?
There was a guy called Woody Smith who had a wood shop, which at the time was one of the largest wood shops in the Midwest.
And his name was Woody Smith?
Woody Smith.
Now, come on, really? Woody Smith, the wood shop guy?
That's the truth, yes. He had since deceased, but his son, Bob Smith, he was the buyer of the machine, the actual buyer. His division was the buyer of the printing machine for Pac-Man. So he said, look, we really like you, and this stuff is a little bit weird for me. He said, why don't you come join us? So I sold them the equipment, and I ended up buying the equipment at the same time. So they were at that time using between 75 and 85 ladies, each of whom held a stick and a piece of metal stencil to the sides of the cabinets, and then two guys would spray the different colors on. I mean, it was horrendous. It was like Dante's Inferno watching these poor people work. And the equipment I supplied them needed two material handlers, people who would load and unload skids of material, load unprinted material, unload printed material, and two press operators. So both of these machines were two colors. You put them in. Technology at this point meant that evaporative inks had been surpassed now, where they were ultraviolet radiated inks that were 100% monomer when the ultraviolet radiation solidified them. So there was no drying process as such. It was set, which meant that you could put colors one behind the other. There was no long tunnels. There was no exhaust.
In those first cabinets, they were built out of birch, right? So you're talking like very much of an artisan approach to Pac-Man.
Yeah, it was all solid core birch plywood, nine ply birch, and a cabinet from Link Smith was being sold to Midway, who were the assemblers of the games, for $400 or $400+ depending on the cabinet. Some more, some of them a little bit less. So the other thing that I did once I joined Link Smith, we looked at ways. I hired a product engineer called Terry Wall from Play School. Actually, he was making wooden toys in Chicago, and together we came up with an idea of using flake board, which was vinyl laminated, had a vinyl film applied to it, and then we could print directly onto that with this UV ink. And then it was taken from there and then machined into shape and assembled. So we reduced the price of the cabinet for internal trade within the Bally Corporation from $400+ to about $140.
Through that process.
Yeah.
And so how many of your Pac-Man machines got built with your cabinetry and have been put out in the world?
On a daily basis, 7 days a week at the height of the business, we were building 3,700 Pac-Man or video games, 860 pinball machines, and 120 slot machines a day. And slot machines came in batches as a casino would open, or they would order machines. Some days you'd be making 500, some days you'd be making none. But on average, it was 120 a day, 365 days a year.
And you were the guy in charge of all that cabinetry to make
All of the packaging, we called it, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but for us outside, it'd be the package. It'd be the cabinetry we would see with the Miss or Pac-Man, swinging, running around the side of it, that kind of thing. Yeah. So was it your work then with the slot machine side that then got you into the gaming, the casino business?
No, it's a little bit more complicated than that. As the video game business kind of went off the boil, Midway's sales sank. Our internal sales within the Bally Corporation obviously were reduced. So if captive business, we went down from close to $50 million worth of trade, internal trade annually, down to $17 million. And I didn't lose a penny.
It was empty
cash as a reduction in the business, in the industry.
Because of your efficiencies and how you were building?
Because the business just went away. There was just not that much in sales anymore. Pinball almost died. The largest clientele for pinball, strangely enough, was France. It's still strong today. And in order to build the business back up, I started to contract with the other video gaming manufacturers also in Chicago to build their games for them too. So it's a contract builder.
So some of the other games like Centipede and...
Konami, Stern. I mean, there was a...
Space Invaders?
Space Invaders was a Bally game. That was the first big game. We made 40,000 of those.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. And what took out the games? Was it that more digital games came online?
More digital games. The more consoles came out. Bally had the Bally Arcade console, which failed. Nolan Bushnell came in with Pong, and we told him he was an idiot and left, and he went back to California and became very rich.
Yeah. So Pong was the beginning of the downside.
It really did crimp. Yeah, it did. Plus, some of the games started to become very, very homogenous.
Yeah.
It was hard to tell one game from another in the end. I mean, the Pac-Man was very distinct.
Yeah, still is today.
Now,
hey, if I know
still be made today.
Yeah. If I know someone that collects Pac-Man and they happen to have one of those old birch cabinets, is it worth more than others?
It might be. That's not necessarily. It's not really the material that has the value. It's the game. It's the software.
Yeah, I thought maybe the lore, the fact that one of the very original ones.
If you were really an aficionado, you might understand that. There are probably very few that do.
Well, now that they're listening to this show, you might go and want to corner the market on birch cabinet Pac-Mans. All right, so. You're in Bally's, you're working with games, video games, and what then led you into the casino world?
I went to Harris Bank and got an orderly liquidation valuation for Link Smith and tried to buy it. And it pissed off the upper management of Bally. Not enough to throw me out, but enough to kind of slap my wrist.
They were just like, who's this upshot? Who does he think he is?
No, they knew who I was, and I don't know if there was really a motive to their... a hidden motive. But anyway, they moved me to the slot division. The slot division was in trouble. They had redesigned the slot machine, and what they'd come up with wasn't very successful, either in game content or in the way it looked. It was the first slot machine that didn't look like a Bally slot machine. And at the first trade show, I joined the slot division in January. The first trade show in those days was in February at the Tropicana. And I stayed in the hospitality suite where we had prototypes of this new game, and everybody came in and said, "Jesus, what's that?"
What was it about it that just wasn't working?
It was Bally had been copied by everybody, and were offended by that rather than revel in it. So what happened was they decided to make a game that was so complicated, so expensive. They came up with a zinc casting, which was gigantic, the whole front door. And said, no one will ever copy this. And they were right. No one ever did. It didn't work.
They were smarter than that.
And I remember standing next to Bob Mullane, the chairman at the time of Bally, and saying, "Bob, why would anybody play this game? It looks smarter than them. It looked like a computer." So, I mean, it just had no personality. It was just a cold, nasty-looking game.
So what year was this? Late 80s, early 90s, something? Yeah,
this would have been, I joined, it would have been mid-80s.
Mid-80s.
Yeah.
So it was ahead of its time.
It was
maybe it never had any time.
It never had a time.
It was, for my knowledge, Bally's, were they one of the largest slot machine makers? I mean, did they really own the industry?
Yeah, they really did. And the reason that changed is the advent of gaming, slot machines, and casinos in Atlantic City. And for some unknown reason, the New Jersey Gaming Control Board, Gaming Commission, decided that no manufacturer should be dominant and imposed a rule, which actually has run around the world, that no slot maker could have more than 50% of a slot floor. So Bally was actually in the very, very untenable position of having to train 2 other companies to build slot machines.
So their competition, huh?
Yeah. And that really, really changed the business.
Yeah.
So
now you're in the slot machine world.
Now I'm in the slot machine world a year after I get to the slot division, trying to sell this horrible-looking machine. France, that had previously had slot machines, passed legislation, was in the process of passing legislation, I should say, to reintroduce slot machines to the French casino business, which was really failing. It was losing altitude. And we sat around, 4 of us, and said, well, who's going to go to France and head this up? And I drew the short straw and went over and became the president of Bally France for the reintroduction of slot machines to the French gaming industry.
Well, there are worse places to work.
Yeah, there are. Not many. No, it was tough. It was really a tough time because I arrived in Paris on a Thursday night. The law was actually passed on a legislative session at like midnight on Saturday. And the Minister of Finance, I think it was, Pasqua, called George Santamaria, who was the owner of Bally France, who I became the president of. Called him, and I listened on the call, and he said, George had worked for 14 years in getting this legislation pushed through. And Pasqua called him and said, George, it's done. And Giscard d'Estaing was the president, I think, at that time, and George had worked with him. A week later, the government fell. So the enabling legislation was in place. Now we had a government that didn't support it. So the new left-leaning Secretary of State, a guy called Pierre Jacques, came out and said, I'm against casinos, I'm against slot machines, it's not right, it's taking advantage of the people. Unfortunately, a lot of the mayors in France were also from the left, some communists, some just socialists, and they saw the casinos as a way to reinvigorate the taxable base within their communities. And a representation of the mayors, left-leaning mayors, came to Paris and imposed on Jacques. And he released 14 licenses. Companies that had already made their applications and had received sort of a nod and a wink that they were going to be approved, but decided that there wouldn't be any more than that. So Bally, again, we had a 50% limit. We sold up to the 50% limit of the market. And that was the first time in a while that Bally had been really dominant in the market. The American competitor at the time was IGT, that had come to dominate the industry in this country, in the United States, because they were more advanced technologically than Bally was at the time. They came in a distant third. Sigma, a Japanese manufacturer. Mm-hmm. There was Aristocrat, an Australian manufacturer. Everybody got a piece, but we got half of the market.
So your job was to develop that market over there of selling Bally slot machines.
Yeah, and we sold from Bally France. We sold into Monte Carlo, the casinos there, SBM. We became the sole supplier of slot machines of SBM. We sold to the casinos, the legal casinos in Italy, San Remo, sole supplier, and to St. Vincent in Valdosta, sole supplier. So we did pretty well.
And how did you then move from that into actually becoming an international casino consultant on how do you build these things so they work and make money and provide people with entertainment?
Yeah, well, the moving back to the United States at the end of my term in Paris, I came out to Nevada. I was made responsible for the operation here in Nevada of the Bally Distributing, and actually turned the company over. I shut down the headquarters in Reno, opened the headquarters where they should have always been in, which is Las Vegas, and turned over the sales force. Actually put in sales training so people didn't sit around saying, where Bally, call me when you need me. Mm-hmm. We actually got guys to go out in the street, go pound the pavement and sell Bally machines.
Did you use storytelling with your salespeople?
Absolutely. A big part of it. Without a story, you got nothing to sell. You just say, we sell these, we sell these, we sell these. That doesn't work.
What was a story, or how did you train them in telling the Bally story?
First and foremost, they had to be technically competent. So I was the first, a guy who's now still in the business, Dave Lucas, is now one of the leaders in the business here in Nevada, was a hire. he sold common hardware in Alaska. But a friend who'd gone to Indiana to school with him said he was a really bright kid and was being wasted away in Alaska. So would I talk to him? And I spoke to him. And he was the top of his trade. And if you're the top of the trade selling common hardware, you got to be pretty good. So I hired him, sent him back to Chicago for 3 months. And he went through the plant, went through all the phases of making a slot machine, worked with the design department, worked with the commercial artists in the design department, the production department. And he had a really good understanding of what made up a slot machine. And then came back out here, and I gave him the crap accounts. So,
you put him to the test.
You can't hurt us. Let's see if you can do us any good. And he really was. And he was very, very good and had a story to tell, because he knew now the history of Bally, where Bally had come from, what Bally's origins were, with Lion Manufacturing being bought by the Mahoney family, which became Bally when Mahoney moved away from the plant. It was also because IGT had come along very strong at the transition from slot machines to video poker. IGT had the first viable poker machine, which became very, very powerful. They were making them for about $1,700 and selling them for $14,000 a piece. I mean, it was huge. When IGT went public, the stock exchange couldn't believe the revenue that was being produced on the cost base that they represented. It was nobody believed it. It was unheard of. So we had really one of the stories to say was the industry deserved to have a Bally, not to let the industry be dominated by a single manufacturer who could call the shots. So that you needed competition. And it appealed to some people. Some people just kind of shook their heads and said, I'm not interested. And that was really part of the story. And it was effective most of the time. And people would give us a break. Plus, we had the largest slot library, much bigger library than IGT.
So part of that story was don't let IGT dominate you?
Don't let them call the shots in the direction the business goes. There should be more than one opinion in the way a business develops.
I got you.
So, Aristocrat, there's a place for them. There's a place here for Konami also, who now are in the gaming business, not just video games, but in slot machines. Ainsworth, an Australian company, another Australian company, which has been purchased by Novomatic. Novomatic is an Austrian company. They're the largest slot machine producers in the world right now, producers and operators. And it's all being fueled by this fire front, this need for tax revenue that has taken off across the United States and really across the world.
Yeah. Are you happy to see Vegas opened up again here?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. It needs it. It's an organic town. It absolutely needs the people. I just hope that they respect the mask that they still need.
When were you first called in to help out with the design of a casino? So this is what I think is so fascinating about your story arc, starting in design and then industrial design and screen printing that then led you to gaming, then video games, and then into the casino world. And when you look back, there are a lot of different intersections that totally make sense on where they came together with your talents and your aspirations.
But you could never project them as a syllabus.
No, you couldn't, could you? No. But when you look back, does it feel like a natural progression?
It feels logical, yeah. They're ricochets that landed well.
Yeah.
And that's really why I've enjoyed so much of what I've done over the years, because it's been varied. It's still varied. I mean, even today, and I'm 76 and not doing very much anymore, but I still do a little bit. And it's always something which piques your interest, because basically what you're trying to do is sell an ephemeral product to people who really take nothing away from it other than a giggle. And that's not easy. That's really not easy. And it takes hours and hours and hours and hours of observation of how people act in a casino, what makes them good, what makes a casino bad, what games work, what games don't work, where in the casino a game works and doesn't work somewhere else, the same game. So when you're soaked in that, I came back from Greece, where I built the first American casino, and I was talking to the architects and the interior designers and telling them what I wanted, and I'd go back and see what they were coming up with. And they were just missing the point. And the more we talked, the more they diverged from what they thought a casino was to what
Can you give me an example, like one thing that really stands out in your mind? You wanted this, and then they showed up with that?
Yeah, it was the creation of an environment that was friendly. So what I wanted to create in this particular casino, which was located in Porta Carassa in northern Greece and Macedonia, close to the Macedonian border, close to the Turkish border, was a representation of Bourbon Street, right? The Mardi Gras feel, the liveliness, the energy of Mardi Gras. And they started to come up with these really cartoons, and that's not what people want. You can be cartoony if that's the environment you're seeking, but if you want to represent a theme, then you have to be faithful to the theme. So it doesn't have to be the same bricks and mortar, but it has to appear to be faithful. So the appearance has got to be just right. And the further we went, the more they diverged, and I said, okay, let's stop. So we got the contractor, we got the architect, we got the interior designers, 4 or 5 or 6 other people. Bought them a ticket. We came to Las Vegas. We spent 3 days here, and then we flew to New Orleans, and we walked around Bourbon Street for 2 days and 2 nights. And then they said, okay, now we get it. It's kitsch, but it's not really kitsch. Anything you can touch should be pretty much real. But anything above what you can reach and touch, you can kind of get away with making it look like it's real. And we came up with what turned out to be a very, very successful design. We had the first skyscape. We had the buildings of Bourbon Street that went through a day-night evolution every 2 hours from day to night, just like the Forum does now at Caesar's Palace. And on the strength of that, everybody who was building a casino in Greece at the time, I think there were a dozen licenses. I think I designed 3 more and picked up 5 management contracts on behalf of Casino Magic. And I left Casino Magic. I came back home. I was done. I've been in Greece now for 14 months. And I was wiped out, basically. While I was home, a friend of mine, Francis Reynaud from the Reynaud family that had the Casino Lyon in Lyon, called me and said, are you doing anything? I said, quite honestly, no, I'm not. I'm just kind of sitting around recovering. He said, I've just bought a casino in Curacao. Would you go down and take a look? See what I got? And I said, sure, I'll take a look. So I flew down to Curacao, and I went for a long weekend. And I was supposed to write a report and tell him what I thought of it. And ended up staying there for just over 11 months and rebuilt the casino for him, redesigned it, and it became the #1 casino on the island.
So I've got to ask at this point, it seems like maybe, well, to me, maybe to some of our listeners too, that it's quite a leap to go from building cabinetry for gaming and so forth to now actually building out inside or consulting and inside of casinos. Was that a leap for you, or did it just feel like a natural progression of your career?
It seemed like a natural progression. I mean, I was interested in the business. I think you have to like people. You have to understand what people like. And it just seemed very natural for me, plus the design background I have. I mean, I've done architecture and industrial design. It just wasn't that complicated. It was like you say, a natural progression.
And from your experience with Pac-Man and Centipede and these other games, did any of that play through on just you saw how people interacted in the user interface of those games? Did that play into your designs and consulting?
At that time, probably not so much. It's become more of a factor today in the modern casinos because the games that you see now are less mechanical. They're nearly all video-based games. They sort of have more the appeal of a video game, actually, than a slot machine. And I think it's because some designers have simply lost sight of who their customers are and really what they want. You sit and watch people today in a casino, and you watch middle-aged people. They have no idea what they're playing. They don't even know how to find the pay tables. They have no idea what the machine pays them.
They're just plugging it in.
They plug it in, put their money in, tap the button, and what comes out, comes out. And that's not the way it was. There are still nickel players, there are quarter players, there are dollar players, there are $5 players. But they don't all play the same machine. And that's what the industry has moved towards.
And what's the impetus of that change of early days of casinos to where they are now?
Because if you stratified your customer base, you knew who to take better care of, you knew who to comp. Now it's plebeian. Everybody's got a card, they put it in, you get so many points per dollar played, or dollar or handle. And you don't even talk to a host anymore. There's almost no human interaction. You're talking to terminals. It's become very, very impersonal. That was the biggest concern everybody had when bill acceptors were introduced. Bally was the first to introduce bill acceptors into slot machines, where you could put a banknote into a machine rather than a coin or a token. And the big concern was that you could come into a casino, lose $100 or $200, walk out and never talk to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
That hasn't actually happened. People enjoy the convenience of being able to put a banknote into a slot machine. The casino enjoys the commitment.
Yeah.
Okay? And now the next iteration of that was when I was with United Gaming, we came up with the first ticket printing machine, where rather than redeeming tokens at the end of a game session, if you had a cash out, you cash out in tokens. Now you print a ticket that's barcoded and has a value and will be accepted on another machine as a bill. Mm-hmm. So the value will be repeated. So these are all great things in terms of back of house efficiency, but they're not necessarily the best part of the experience that a player has.
Is that because more of the financial community investors got involved and they're really just looking at the bottom line?
I think that's a big driver. Is the money has become so huge now to build a casino, it's nothing to hear. I mean, Steve won $4.5 billion for the win. The joint across from this place, the
Stratosphere.
No, that was Stupak Stump. That's a whole other thing. That was Stupak was actually a great guy. He was one of the great Vegas characters, but he was a character.
We'll leave it at that. Yeah. You built casinos or consulted on them around the world. What was one of the craziest places you found yourself?
The craziest place was, I mean, there's all kinds of crazy places. In West Africa, they have slot machines in shops, and they build a cage around them. So the machine's in a cage, so no one can get to them. A fact that probably not many people know is that one of the largest slot machine operators in the world is the U.S. Army, or really? The U.S. military forces, I should say. Between them, I think that their population of machines in bases around the world represents probably more than 30,000 machines.
And are they doing that for more than just entertaining our men and women serving overseas?
Entertainment is the byproduct. Burning off some time is a good way to use up the soldiers' energy. But it also supplants money that the government is no longer giving to the military for social programs, for babysitters and home childcare and things like that. Yeah. So it supports it. The government really doesn't like you to talk about it that much because they don't really want to know that they're skinning the troops in order to pay for their child welfare.
Did you also do a casino in Russia?
I did some designs for casinos in Russia, yes. Mm-hmm. And they're very special places. Now they've all gone now. I think there are 2, maybe 3 gaming zones. One in Siberia,
yeah.
One in Kukunsk, way in eastern Russia, close to the Korean border, I think it is. And now they're looking to introduce gaming into Sochi on the Black Sea, so that the middle-class Russians got an opportunity while he's on vacation at the Black Sea to participate in gambling. But the biggest gamblers I've ever seen were in Moscow, when the casinos in Moscow are operating. You'd see people walk in with $300,000-$400,000 in banknotes.
Wow. And
leave when they lost it.
Yeah.
And all they had was the grin, probably 2 or 3 nice meals, a room, a bathroom, suite where they would stay overnight, because if it took them more than a day to lose their money, they had to obviously have a place to stay while they lost it. And one place I had 5 separate elevators going up to the penthouse in this building, so that a driver or the player's driver could drive into the garage, shut the door behind him, walk from the car straight to an elevator door and go straight up to his suite.
The driver himself?
The driver would drive the car in, shut the door behind him, and then the player would go straight up to his suite in an elevator.
So what goes into your storytelling mind when you are thinking about a new venue and say, you're here in a highly competitive strip like Vegas to make that casino stand out? What goes into the creation of that story?
Well, you have to decide who your customers are going to be, because the way the casino presents itself is a reflection of the people that you're going to attract and hold. So if you take a Win always goes for the top of the market. His expenditures or investments are over the top. I think the Win was $3.5 billion, and when it was first shown to the press and to Wall Street, they said, if he'd stopped $1 billion shorter, he'd would have basically the same thing. That's not the way Wynn works. Wynn is really something special for Las Vegas. If it wasn't for Steve, Wynn Vegas wouldn't look the way it does today. I'm convinced of that. It's absolutely top class. Pay for the top, got the top. If you go to the Stardust now, it's gone, so it's been replaced by resorts, owned by Genting out of Malaysia, I think they are. But if you went into there, the place was a little bit grubby. The carpet was a little bit threadbare. It was an awful lot of smoke in the air. But when you went in there, you saw working class people sitting smoking a cigarette and enjoying themselves. So the place really was exactly a reflection of the clientele that it attracted and held. And the Bellagio, when it first opened in the shopping mall, if a guest walked to the shopping mall entrance pushing a baby carriage or stroller, they were told no, they couldn't enter. Because that's not the kind of people that they wanted. If you called to the Bellagio to reserve a room, they asked you if there were any minor children. And you said yes. They said, well, but we'd prefer if why don't you call the Mirage, which owned by the same people. They didn't want that in the casino. And as they've been successful because they know what the clientele wants, and MGM, when it first opened, had a theme park. And Bob Maxey, who had worked with Wynn at the Golden Nugget, was running the MGM. It was his concept to have a theme park. Everybody said, you're crazy. And he said, no, this is it. This is a family destination. And I got on planes with people and said, the kids running around the casino, are they crazy? And it was a failure, and the theme park's gone. Yeah. I mean, it's really understanding. You have to understand who your audience is. And
it's like in anything, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you've got the brand. I mean, when Circus showed up, to me, I was a very young man, maybe even a kid at that point, but I always thought that seemed like such an odd thing to have in Vegas. And then they had the Circus hydroplane. Yeah. And up in Seattle, where I grew up, Seafair was the festival of the year with the gigantic hydroplane race, Saturdays and Sundays. And here came the Circus, and everybody was pulling for
Bill
it.
Bennett, great guy. Yeah. And he knew his customers. Yeah. He built a couple of private airstrips for modelers. He was a big model guy.
Oh,
model airplanes, yeah. Built a couple of strips around town so that everybody could use them. He's a really great guy.
Yeah. What's then the overall secret within a successful casino, making people feel? How are they trying to make these folks feel?
You got to make little people feel big.
And when you mean little people?
I mean, if I'm a plumber, and I'm a successful plumber, and I've got 40 trucks, and I'm servicing the Bay Area, I'm probably getting $60 an hour for my workers. But I'm a plumber. And I'm not going to have access to the hoi polloi and the hot places around San Francisco. You come to Vegas and you're a king. Because they don't respect the person, they respect the money. So he can walk into the Bellagio, he can walk into Wynn, get a suite, and feel like a king. He feels important. He's just a plumber. And that's nothing wrong with that. That's good. He comes away and he can be someone else for the weekend. Maybe that's what it is. Yeah. You don't have to be yourself, the same humdrum life you have. The great story is that the couple driving back on Sunday afternoon from Las Vegas to California, and he's driving and she's sitting next to him, they're quiet. And she says, well, how much did you lose? And he says, oh, I did okay. I lost maybe $200. And he lied. He lost $2,000. And she knows that. And he says, well, how did you do? And she says, oh, I was about the same, but I lost about $200. And he knows she lost $1,500. And they sit quietly for a second. She says, yeah, but we'll go back next week, right? Yeah.
Because they had fun.
They had fun. Their experience was equal to the value of what they spent.
Yeah.
And once that's out of whack, once there's an imbalance there, your product will die.
When they're really feeling the sting of that loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because and one of the concerns I have with the financial people that really now dominate within the business rather than the creative people is that they become too efficient in taking money away and too efficient in removing the interface between the player and the casino, the human interface. That concerns me because they are very efficient in taking your money. But you should feel something. You should feel that you're valued. And that they have, I think today they have a hard time
understanding that.
Yeah.
What do you say to people that think just the whole industry is crooked and they're just fleecing people?
Well, for New Jersey, my gaming license, I had to fill a 260-page personal history form.
Mm-hmm.
I had relatives so far removed I didn't even know about. And my wife would have to call them and ask them how much the mortgage they had on their home, how much they owed. I mean, they freaked out at the idea that there's any funny money in the business. And they did a huge job in cleaning that out. In fact, Bob, I will go there. They're not fleecing people. If like I said, if there's equity in what the person receives for the money they're willing to invest or spend.
Yeah. So
I mean, it's no worse than paying $15 for a movie ticket and coming out and saying that movie was crap.
No, it's paying $15 and then $10 for the popcorn, and then you come out and that movie was crap.
The movie was crap.
Yeah, never thought about it that way. So you might say, "Hey, let's go to France, Paris. We're going to spend $10,000 and spend a week there, and come back and say that was wonderful."
Yeah.
Or they come down and lose a couple thousand here over 2 days, and they still had a great time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what you're thinking?
Yeah. That value return has got to be there. And
Yeah.
if you miss that, you're gonna die.
Yeah. What's the one truth maybe that came out of all of your work in the casino world, that one thread that maybe was surprising to you in hindsight, that in the work you've done and the entertainment that you've provided and so forth?
I don't know. That's really hard to put my finger on, because the experience has been so broad. The best experience, probably the most wholesome experience I had, was building the first casino in Greece. But even more than that, building the first casino in Switzerland, the first American-style casino, which I built in Montreux. That was when I was consulting for the Barrier Group. I did the entire thing, soup to nuts, the preparation of the presentation to the Swiss Gaming Board, all the way through the bid process, tearing down the building that we replaced, rebuilding the building that we replaced, designing and equipping, right down to the signage in the casino. So it was complete, and that was a hugely satisfying experience. Mm-hmm. We soft opened on a Saturday morning.
Again, what year do you think?
This was 20 years ago, I guess now.
20?
Time flies.
It's 2000-ish?
Yeah, 2000-ish. And we had a soft opening. All we invited were a dozen journalists, couple of people from the local radio station, television station, I think, and we stood on the back steps. This is overlooking Lake Geneva and the building. And, we said we'd won the bid against all odds. Montreux had received a license. Everybody said it wouldn't. They said Lausanne was going to get that license. And if they did get it, it was going to fail. So we opened the doors, and these half a dozen people came in. And all you heard was, and that was nuts.
Breathtaking.
Yeah. And we opened, that was at 10. At 2 the next morning, I split the last bowl of pasta in one of the restaurants with the vice president of gaming for the Barrier Group. And there were 29,000 people had gone through the casino.
Wow. Opening day.
With not one advertisement. That was just off the telephone, the cell phones on opening day, yeah.
Yeah.
From that half a dozen people that walked in. But that was the most exciting day. You couldn't walk in the place. It was nuts.
It was cool.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah. Well, to wrap up, and if you want to talk about this, great. If not, you don't. You had mentioned a few minutes ago about having to dig back in your past and fill out all the paperwork to say, so there's no funny money in the gaming world and whatever. Well, in digging back in your past through 23andMe, you have found who your father was. Yep. And who your wonderful sisters are.
Yep.
And we all got acquainted 2 weeks ago.
And in the spirit of full disclosure, you're my brother-in-law, which I realized only this morning.
Yeah, I thought about that the other day. Yeah.
Yeah, as actually my son started digging around in my past.
And that's Liam.
Liam. He's a contractor in California and around in the Beverly Hills area, doing very well for himself. Liam had seen a copy of my birth certificate where my name is Hugh James Reynolds Lavelle, which is my mother's maiden name. I was brought up as Hugh Shaddick, which is my stepfather's surname, although I was never adopted by him. So Liam apparently was always puzzled by this and decided to go rake around and see what he could come up with, and bumped into a Carez Reynolds. He was given a 23andMe as a Christmas present this past Christmas.
And for clarity, Kires Reynolds is my nephew.
Yeah.
My wife's sister's son.
Yeah. So they got together, and he approached me, Liam did, and said, look, this is what I found out. Are you interested in pursuing it? So I wasn't really sure. And
this is about 4 months ago.
This is about 4 months ago. Are you interested in pursuing it? And I said, well, I'm really not. Give me a couple of days to think about it. So I thought about it for a while. And the discussion had never occurred within my family other than the fact that I knew that Peter Shaddick wasn't my biological father. So a couple of days later, I called him back. I said, look, if you want to do this, it's not as much for me, but for you and for your daughter and whoever comes after, then let's go ahead and do it. So he sent me a 23andMe package. I spit in the tube, and I waited for 3 weeks, and it came back that I was part of a family genealogy tree that goes back to James Reynolds, my two middle names. James Reynolds was a pilot in the Second World War, flew P-51s out of England over Germany, was decorated various times, and was quite distinguished in terms of his service.
52 missions over here.
52, full complement of missions, that was it. And then was shot down in France, apparently, at some point, was hidden by the French resistance. So he really had a distinguished career. And at the end of the conflict, was stationed at Chalmette, a French, American Air Force base in France, and became one of the lead pilots, the number one pilot, actually, for the Sky Blazers, which is the forerunner of the Thunderbirds. Digging back past him, you go all the way back to Oklahoma. His brother was Allie Reynolds, Super Chief.
Famous pitcher for the Yankees.
Pitched 5 no-hitters. Actually pitched a no-hitter in one of the World Series for the 5 rings they got. And if you dig back another level, this is really like an onion. You get back to I've got 3.5% Native American blood in my veins. And that comes from the Muskegon Nation Creek Indian. So it's opened up a new dimension. Pulling that forward, I've got 4 adorable sisters, Michele, Jimmy Ann, Trish, and Carrie, who invited me to Arizona Memorial Day weekend for, I guess you can't really say it's a reunion because it's the first time any of us had met. So with a little bit of trepidation, we all got together, and it was probably the most wonderful weekend I've had in my life. I met 4 really adorable people, and you're not adorable.
No.
You're a good guy. and their kids, and it's not really a tree. It's like a forest. There's a lot of Reynolds out there.
There is, and
I'm really proud to be part of it.
It was just so honored to meet you and Susan and to get to know your family. And, you're the brother that they never knew they had, that they have now. But, they lost their brother, Steve, in Vietnam as a very young man over there. So you showing up now in their life is really, really a powerful thing.
Yeah, plugged a hole.
Yeah. More than just plugging a hole. And I think we all agree. I only knew your father for a brief time because he passed away. I maybe knew him for about a year after we got married. But the resemblance and your mannerisms just blew me away. And all your sisters say the same thing, by the way.
Jimmy Ann was very, very much. She said all the time, "Wow, that's just what Dad did. That's just what Dad did." It just makes me feel so good. It was just a really great, warm weekend. It was great.
We found a picture and all this because they were pulling together photos for the photo album they gave you. And I don't know if you saw this picture. They showed it to me afterwards of your dad, Jim Reynolds, who was a running back at Oklahoma A&M, which is now Oklahoma State.
I saw that, yeah.
And did you see the writing on the back of it? That he led the nation in rushing in 1940.
Yeah.
And then was called away to the war, flew his 52 missions over Europe, came back, and then that was a photo when he was a junior tailback for Oklahoma A&M, and they went on to win the Sugar Bowl, which was the national champion then.
Yeah.
So you come from very good genes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, this has been an absolute honor. And I really appreciate you only having known you and you knowing me for a couple of weeks to come on the Business of Story, tell your amazing story, and then share this connection you have now with your family.
Well, it's been great fun, and I hope I've made a contribution that you can use.
Oh, you absolutely have. And you've made a contribution throughout your life to a lot of people.
That's good. Yeah. That's really good.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks.
So thank you for listening to this special edition of the Business of Story. And if you've been a long-time listener, thank you. You have lots of choices of who to listen to out there, and I'm honored that you have chosen me. If you liked what you heard today, please feel free to share it with your friends, family, colleagues. And if you have a similar story like this, please share it with me. We're always fascinated about our backstories, our origin stories, and where our stories will take us. If I can be of service to you, come on over to the Business of Story. And if you have not yet taken our brand new, The ABTs of Selling short online master course, well, you got to do it now. I'm going to teach you about the and, but, and therefore, and how to use the ABT in all of your messaging. It's how you hook your sales prospect from the very start of your presentation. It's how you dive into and access the primal neural network of your buyer where all their real buying decisions are being made. The ABT is fantastic for email writing. It will shorten your emails by 2/3. Your readers will actually understand what in the world you're saying in them, and it'll deliver an amazing call to action. You can use the ABT in all of your messaging because what I have found after 20 years of studying storytelling and creating the story cycle system to help you with your brand story, that the ABT is the only place to start, to build on, to become a very compelling, confident, powerful communicator to connect with your audiences, connect with your prospects, connect with your buyers, connect with your customers, and have that impact in the world that you see. So check it out at the ABTs of Selling. It's on Thinkific. You'll find it at businessofstory.thinkific.com. That's businessofstory.thinkific.com. Go there right now. Introductory price of $35. I don't know how long we're going to keep it, but we're going to keep it right now at that price point for this anniversary edition. And I hope to see you there. And until next Monday, when I will have another amazing story artist right here for you, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thank you so much for listening.